She dealt cards in a viper's den, debt-trapped, forced to cheat, her sick sister's life hanging by a thread. Then a cold-eyed stranger, a billionaire whose name whisper of empires, watched her trembling hands. He didn't just expose her tormentor, he bought her debt, claimed her as his obsession, and shattered a criminal empire to keep her safe. But was this salvation, or just a new, far more dangerous kind of trap? The scent of stale cigar smoke, expensive liquor, and the faint metallic tang of unadulterated greed clung to Ava's skin like a second shadow. It was the permanent perfume of the Viper's Den, an exclusive underground poker club nestled deep within the city's opulent underbelly. Here, fortunes were won and lost on the turn of a card, and lives, often, hung precariously in the balance. Ava knew this better than anyone. She lived it night after suffocating night. Her fingers, long and slender, moved with a balletic precision honed by years of practice. The cards, sleek and vibrant under the amber glow of the table lamp, whispered between her thumb and forefinger, a flash of red, a blur of black, before landing with practiced ease in front of each player. A natural, they called her. A magician with a deck. But no magic could conjure away the crippling debt that shackled her to this gilded cage. A low murmur of anticipation rippled around the table as she began to deal the final round. For men, their faces etched with varying degrees of tension and avarice, leaned forward. Their eyes, sharp and predatory, tracked her every move, searching for the slightest tell, the minutest imperfection. Ava's face remained a serene mask, her deep-set emerald eyes betraying nothing. It was a practiced calm, a shield forged in the fires of necessity. Inside, however, a storm of despair churned, threatening to pull her under. Each chip that clinked, each breath held, was a reminder of Lily, her sister. Her beautiful, fragile Lily, battling a rare form of muscular dystrophy that was slowly, mercilessly stealing her away. The medical bills, a monstrous, ever-growing leviathan, had driven Ava into this abyss. Victor Thorne, the Viper himself, had been her only, terrifying recourse. He'd lent her the money, an astronomical sum, with terms that bled her dry, securing her services as his prize dealer, and in truth, her very soul. The Viper's kindness was a barb hook, designed to drag you deeper into his murky waters. A chill, unrelated to the club's meticulously controlled temperature, snaked down Ava's spine. She felt a familiar pressure, a warmth against her left shoulder, even before the expensive cologne, cloyingly sweet yet undeniably menacing, reached her nostrils. Victor. A voice smooth as polished obsidian, purred beside her ear. Always the picture of concentration. Don't want any mishaps, do we? Ava's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She didn't turn, didn't flinch. To acknowledge him too readily was to invite further intrusion. To ignore him completely was to risk his wrath. It was a delicate, treacherous dance she performed every shift. The game is well in hand, Mr. Thorne, she replied, her voice a cool, practiced monotone, utterly devoid of the terror coiling in her gut. Victor's fingers, adorned with a heavy gold signet ring, brushed against the small of her back as he moved past, a touch that felt less like a caress and more like a brand. His gaze, even from across the room as he settled into a plush leather booth, felt like a physical weight on her. It was a look that promised ownership, a chilling reminder that she was merely a commodity, purchased and controlled. His smile, when he granted it to his favored patrons, never quite reached his eyes. Those eyes, dark and fathomless, held only calculation and a hunger she instinctively recognized as dangerous. Mishaps. The word echoed in her mind, a subtle threat veiled in a velvet glove. Victor loved his games. Not just the cards, but the games of power and fear he played with everyone around him. And Ava, with her desperate love for Lily, was his favorite pawn. The last hand was played, the chips tallied. A man in a tailored suit sighed in defeat. Another chuckled in victory. Ava collected the cards, shuffling them with practiced ease, her mind already drifting to the hushed, sterile confines of Lily's hospital room. That was her real world. This, the Viper's Den, was merely the purgatory she endured to keep that world alive. Later, as the club slowly emptied, the hum of conversations fading into the distant thrum of the city, Ava walked home through the relentless drizzle. The cold rain, usually a welcome cleanse after the smoky confines of the den, felt abrasive against her already raw nerves. Her cheap, worn jacket offered little solace against the biting wind. The apartment she called home was a stark contrast to the opulence she left behind. Small, cramped, and perpetually chilled, It reeked faintly of antiseptic and her own quiet desperation. She kicked off her worn boots, the dull thud echoing in the silence. The only sounds were the incessant patter of rain against the window pane and the hollow ache in her chest. She pulled out her phone, the cracked screen illuminating Lily's smiling face, a photo from before the illness took hold, when laughter came easy and fear was a distant concept. She dialed a hospital, her voice hushed, seeking reassurance that her sister was stable, breathing, still fighting. "She had a good day, Miss Collins," the nurse's tired voice chirped. "Ate all her lunch." A small, fragile wave of relief washed over Ava, quickly followed by the familiar, crushing weight of responsibility. Good days were fleeting. Bad days were expensive. And Victor Thorne always collected. Always. She sank onto the worn sofa, the springs groaning in protest. Her gaze fell upon the stack of medical bills on the coffee table, a tower of white paper that seemed to mock her efforts. How much longer could she keep this up? How many more pieces of herself would Victor demand? The thought was a suffocating blanket, pressing down on her lungs until she felt she couldn't draw another breath. Her life was a tightly wound spring, stretched to its breaking point, held together by sheer willpower and the fragile thread of Lily's existence. She closed her eyes, wishing for an escape, a miracle. Anything to sever the invisible chains binding her to Victor, to this life, to this pervasive, unending fear. Tomorrow night, a new face would sit at her table. A man whose name alone whispered of a different kind of power, a power that might just offer a different kind of trap. And Ava, trapped as she was utterly unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon, ready to tear her world apart and perhaps reforge it anew. The air in the Viper's den had thickened, heavy with the scent of anticipation and the unspoken promises of ruin. Ava, though, felt a sudden, inexplicable shift, a ripple in the carefully constructed facade of the club. It wasn't a sound, but a palpable change in the collective energy, a hush that fell over the usually boisterous room. Her gaze, trained to observe without staring, flickered towards the entrance. He stood there, framed by the opulent archway, a figure of such formidable presence that he seemed to absorb the light, rather than reflect it. Elias Thorne. The name alone, whispered through the city's highest echelons and darkest corners, carried the weight of empires and an unspoken ruthlessness. He wasn't like Victor, whose power was loud, flamboyant, and reeking of desperation. Elias Thorne's power was a silent, unyielding force. His suit, impeccably tailored charcoal, seemed to cling to a physique honed not by brute force, but by deliberate, disciplined strength. His dark hair was slicked back, revealing a sharp, intelligent face, a jawline that could cut glass, and eyes, glacial blue, piercing, and utterly devoid of warmth. A shiver, both of apprehension and something akin to a primal awe, coursed through Ava. Men like him didn't frequent the Viper's den for casual entertainment. They came to conquer. And the way his gaze swept the room, dismissive yet acutely aware, made her feel exposed, even from behind the relative safety of her dealer's station. He moved, a predator surveying his domain, and settled at a table across the room. Not her table, not yet. Relief, fragile as a butterfly's wing, fluttered in her chest. She continued dealing, her movements fluid, but an underlying tremor had begun. The knowledge that such a man was within these walls added another layer of tension to her already suffocating existence. An hour later, as fate, or perhaps Victor's calculated design, would have it, Elias Thorne rose and made his way towards her. The footsteps were soft against the plush carpet, yet Ava heard them like a drumbeat in her ears. He stopped at her table, his height a dominant shadow, his presence overwhelming. He didn't speak, merely regarded her with those intense blue eyes as he settled into the vacant seat directly opposite her. The air around them crackled. "Evening, Mr. Thorne," Ava managed, her voice steadier than she felt. The rich, clean scent of his cologne, a blend of cedarwood and something sharp, almost metallic, was a stark contrast to Victor's cloying sweetness. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Ava, he acknowledged, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly smooth, yet carrying an unmistakable authority. It was the first time he'd spoken her name, and it felt like a brand. The game began, a high-stakes affair that drew the attention of the entire club. Victor, observing from his usual booth, watched with an unsettling intensity. Tonight's opponent for Elias was a particularly odious man, a corrupt councilman Victor needed to keep indebted. Ava felt Victor's gaze burn into her, a silent command. Halfway through a crucial hand, as Ava began to deal the river card, she saw it a minute, almost invisible twitch of Victor's jaw, a tiny flicker in his dark eyes. It was the signal. Miss Steele. A subtle error, just enough to shift the odds in the councilman's favor, but difficult to prove. Her blood ran cold. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic bird desperate to escape its cage. Lily. The image of her sister's pale, trusting face flashed behind her eyes. If she refused, Victor would make her pay. And Lily would bear the brunt. If she complied, she would be violating her own integrity, a small but precious piece she still desperately clung to. Her hands, usually so steady, began to tremble, just barely. She swallowed hard, the dryness in her throat making it difficult. The card, slick and unforgiving, was poised between her fingers. Her gaze, desperate and pleading, darted up, meeting Elias Thorne's across the table. His blue eyes, fathomless and sharp, seemed to bore into her very soul. She saw no judgment, only a terrifying, all-encompassing awareness. In that fleeting, silent exchange, it felt as though he saw everything, her fear, her desperation, the terrible choice Victor had forced upon her. It was a moment suspended in time, raw and unforgettable. Then, just as the card was about to land, Elias's voice cut through the tension, calm as a glacier, yet resonating with absolute command. Dealer, he said, his eyes never leaving Ava's, I believe that card was meant for the discard pile. A slight oversight. A gasp rippled around the table. The councilman blanched. Victor Thorne's face, usually so composed, contorted for a microsecond, a flash of pure, undiluted fury. He hadn't accused Ava of cheating. He hadn't made a scene. He had simply, yet utterly, asserted his authority, his sharp intellect, and his unwavering observation. He had called out the manipulation without naming the manipulator, saving Ava from direct accusation while dismantling Victor's scheme. Ava's breath hitched. A wave of shocking relief washed over her, so potent it almost made her sway. He had seen. He had understood. And he had acted. But the relief was swiftly eclipsed by a fresh surge of terror. Victor's gaze, when it found hers across the room, was venomous, a silent promise of gruesome retribution. Elias Thorne's intervention had saved her in the moment, but it had painted a target on her back, larger and more defined than ever before. Elias, oblivious or uncaring of Victor's silent wrath, merely watched Ava, a hint of something unreadable in his gaze. He had saved her, yes, but he had also irrevocably pulled her into his dangerous orbit. And Ava, trembling with a mixture of fleeting hope and profound dread, knew instinctively that her life, already a precarious tightrope walk, had just taken a far more perilous turn. She had been seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. And that, in itself, was a terrifying new trap. The air in the Viper's den had turned sour for Ava. Victor's fury, barely contained the previous night, had erupted like a slow, venomous geyser. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten with grand gestures. Instead, he simply intensified her purgatory. Ava found herself relegated to the most dangerous tables, where the stakes were impossibly high and the players' tempers were shorter than their losing streaks. These were the games that ended not with a handshake, but with hushed threats and the chilling whisper of illicit debts being collected. Her usual precise movements became even more critical. One misstep, one perceived insult, could ignite a powder keg of violence. Each night, as she shuffled and dealt, she felt the invisible noose around her neck tightening. But it was his escalating threats against Lily that truly flayed her raw. Victor started sending messages. A wilting bouquet of lilies left on her doorstep, the same flowers she'd cherished as a child. A cryptic text message sent to her burner phone, featuring an aerial photo of Lily's hospital wing, the words such delicate health chilling her to the bone. He knew. He always knew. Ava would lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of her apartment, the silence punctuated by the frantic beat of her own heart, imagining Victor's men lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to snatch away the last fragile piece of her world. The suffocating fear for Lily was a constant companion, more real than the air she breathed. Amidst this escalating terror, an unnerving pattern emerged. Elias Thorne. He wasn't at her table every night, but his presence in the club became more frequent, more deliberate. He watched her, not with Victor's predatory hunger, but with an intense, unwavering scrutiny that made her skin prickle. He would sit alone in a secluded booth, sipping a single amber-hued drink, his glacial blue eyes tracking her from across the room. Victor noticed. Everyone noticed. The Viper, usually so confident in his control, began to seethe. He knew the kind of power Elias Thorne wielded, power that could crush even him. Elias's interest in Ava wasn't just a casual glance. It was a silent, unmistakable declaration of intent. Then came the day that irrevocably changed everything. Ava was at the hospital, her stomach churning with anxiety, trying to decipher Lily's latest medical report. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She answered, her voice trembling. Miss Collins, a smooth, professional male voice asked. My name is Hayes. I represent Elias Thorne. Ava's breath caught. Yes. Mr. Thorne has acquired your outstanding debt from Victor Thorne. Effective immediately, your obligations to Mr. Victor Thorne are null and void. The world seemed to tilt. Null and void? The words, so simple, so profound, echoed in her head. Her debt? Gone? A surge of dizzying relief threatened to overwhelm her, almost making her drop the phone. But it was quickly followed by a cold, hard knot of distrust. Nothing came free in this world, especially not from men like Elias Thorne. What does that mean? She whispered, her voice barely audible. It means, Hayes continued, his tone unperturbed, that you now belong to Mr. Elias Thorne. He expects your presence at his residence this evening. A car will collect you at 7 p.m. Belong to him. The phrase was a brand, burning through her momentary relief. She had merely traded one cage for another, one owner for a more powerful, more mysterious one. She wanted to scream, to rail against the injustice, to demand her freedom. But then the image of Lily, hooked up to tubes and machines, flashed before her eyes. Lily. Her sister needed this. Her sister needed the best care, and Victor would never allow that. This was for Lily. Always for Lily. With a heavy heart, Ava agreed. That evening, a sleek black sedan, impossibly silent, pulled up to her dilapidated apartment building. It was a stark, almost comical contrast to her surroundings. She carried a single worn duffel bag, containing the paltry sum of her earthly possessions. As she stepped into the plush leather interior, the scent of expensive new car and a faint trace of Elias's cologne enveloped her, a sensory confirmation of her new reality. The drive was short but seemed to stretch for an eternity. The car ascended to the very pinnacle of the city, stopping at a towering skyscraper of glass and steel. Elias Thorne's penthouse. It was a world away from the grime and shadows of the Viper's Den, yet it felt equally, if not more, confining. The apartment itself was an architectural marvel, sprawling, minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking, panoramic view of the glittering city below. Marble floors gleamed, pristine and cold. Modern art pieces, abstract and imposing, adorned the walls. It was a space designed for power, for contemplation, for an individual who demanded absolute control. But it was utterly devoid of warmth, of personal touches, of anything that spoke of a home. It was a golden cage indeed. Elias Thorne was waiting. He stood by the vast window, his back to her, a silhouette against the city lights. He turned slowly as she entered, his blue eyes sweeping over her with the same intense scrutiny she had witnessed in the club. Ava, he said, his voice deep and even. He made no move to approach, maintaining a careful distance. Welcome to your new residence. My residence? Ava's voice was tinged with bitter irony. Or my prison. A muscle in his jaw twitched, but his expression remained impassive. A sanctuary, Miss Collins. A place where Victor Thorne cannot touch you. Or your sister. Her breath hitched at the mention of Lily. He knew. He had researched everything. This man owned her body and soul, through her greatest vulnerability. There are rules, Elias stated, his voice cutting through her turbulent thoughts. You will not leave this penthouse without an escort. Your phone will be a secure device provided by my staff. You will not discuss the specifics of your situation with anyone. And you will be under constant surveillance for your own safety. Each word was a tightening of the invisible chains. Distrust warred with a reluctant flicker of hope. He was offering safety, absolute safety for Lily. But at what cost herself? I'm not your prisoner, Ava dared to challenge, though her voice trembled betrayingly. Elias finally took a step closer, his eyes locking onto hers. The intensity of his gaze was almost a physical blow. No, Ava, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. You are not a prisoner. You are mine, and I protect what is mine with everything I have. The finality in his tone, the possessive claim, sent a shiver through her. She was safe, yes, but the cost was her autonomy, her very self. She had escaped Victor's open malice, only to fall into Elias's meticulous, luxurious, and utterly confining embrace. The thought was both terrifying and, to her utter dismay, strangely compelling. What kind of man demanded such control, yet offered such absolute protection? And what would he demand in return for this gilded sanctuary? She looked into his unreadable blue eyes, feeling the weight of his claims settle upon her, a heavy velvet shroud. The penthouse, for all its breathtaking views and opulent silence, initially felt like an exquisite prison. Ava chafed under the constant, albeit discreet, surveillance. Elena, a woman with sharp, observant eyes and a quiet efficiency, was her primary escort, her shadow whenever Ava ventured beyond the immediate living space. The secure device phone allowed only pre-approved contacts, mostly medical staff for Lily and Elias himself. Freedom, a concept she hadn't truly possessed in years, now felt even more distant, replaced by an unsettling sense of being constantly observed, constantly managed. Yet, amidst this golden confinement, Elias's presence began to unravel, piece by careful piece. He was rarely physically present during the day, consumed by his corporate empire, but his influence was omnipresent. Lily's medical care, once a labyrinth of insurance forms and desperate pleas, became seamless. The finest specialists, cutting-edge treatments, even a private nurse, all arranged with a silent, unquestioning efficiency that took Ava's breath away. She received daily, detailed updates on Lily's progress, reports that spoke of genuine improvement, not just fleeting good days. The crushing weight of her sister's illness, a burden she had carried alone for so long, was subtly, imperceptibly being lifted. Ava often found herself watching Elias from a distance, trying to reconcile the ruthless billionaire with a meticulous protector. She'd observe him in his home office, a vast space dominated by gleaming screens and hushed conversations with unseen individuals. His voice, when on a call, was a low, authoritative rumble, dissecting complex financial strategies with surgical precision. She'd overhear snippets of conversations, hostile takeovers, international deals, corporate maneuvers that spoke of a mind utterly dedicated to power and control. He was a force, unstoppable, and perhaps truly dangerous. But then there were the smaller, unexpected gestures. One morning she mentioned, almost to herself, that she missed her old, worn drawing sketchbook. By evening, a brand-new expensive set of artist's pencils and a pristine leather-bound sketchbook appeared silently on her bedside table. Another time, she complained about the overly formal meals prepared by his private chef. The next day, a simple, comforting lasagna, reminiscent of her grandmother's cooking, materialized for lunch. He never commented, never drew attention to these acts. They simply were. These subtle acts of care chipped away at her ingrained distrust, planting tiny seeds of curiosity. Their direct interactions were still marked by a taut tension, a dance around the unspoken. They often shared meals in the vast, formal dining room, the silence punctuated only by the soft clink of silverware. Ava, initially guarded, found herself observing his habits. He ate sparingly, with a controlled elegance, his blue eyes often sweeping to her, catching her gaze, holding it for a beat too long before looking away. He rarely spoke of his personal life, but he would ask about hers, about Lily, about her past as a dealer. He listened, truly listened, with an intensity that made her feel, for the first time, truly seen. One evening, Ava received a particularly disheartening update from Lily's doctor. A new complication had arisen, a minor setback, but to Ava, it felt like the world crumbling. She retreated to her room, the suffocating fear returning with a vengeance. Hours later, she emerged, drawn by the faint scent of coffee. Elias was in the living room, complex financial reports spread before him, but his attention seemed elsewhere. He looked up as she entered, his gaze immediately softening, losing its usual sharp edge. "Lily?" he asked, his voice unexpectedly gentle. Ava's carefully constructed composure crumbled. Her eyes welled up, and a single, unbidden tear tracked a path down her cheek. It's a new complication. Nothing critical, the doctor says, but it's just a never-ending. I feel so helpless." The words were a choked whisper, raw with her despair. Elias rose slowly, deliberately. He didn't approach, but his gaze remained fixed on her, unwavering, filled with an empathy she hadn't expected from him. "Helplessness is a burden," he said, his voice low, resonating with an unexpected depth. But you are not alone in carrying it, Ava. And Lily is stronger than you know. She has your fight in her. His words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within her. It wasn't pity, but a quiet, powerful recognition of her struggle. He saw her resilience, not just her vulnerability. In that moment, the carefully constructed wall around her heart cracked just a little. She saw past the owner, past the billionaire, to a man who, perhaps, understood pain and fight in his own way. The shift in their dynamic became almost palpable after that. The air between them, once thick with apprehension, now hummed with a different kind of tension, a growing unspoken chemistry. His eyes lingered on her longer, a silent question in their depths. Her own gaze, once wary, now sought his, drawn by an irresistible magnetism. One night, while standing by the penthouse window, looking out at the glittering city, Ava shivered. Without a word, Elias, who had been across the room, moved closer. He didn't touch her, but his presence, the warmth emanating from him, was a tangible comfort. Cold, he murmured, his voice a low caress. Before she could answer, he smoothly slipped off his impeccably tailored blazer and draped it over her shoulders. The fabric, still warm from his body, carried his scent, cedar and that clean, sharp metallic tang, enveloping her in a cocoon of warmth and something far more potent. Their fingers brushed as she adjusted the jacket, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt, sharp and electrifying, through her. Their eyes met, and in that charged silence, a new understanding bloomed. It wasn't just gratitude, nor was it just a reluctant acceptance of her fate. It was a nascent, dangerous attraction, a simmering desire that threatened to ignite the fragile peace she had found in his golden cage. She was beginning to see him not just as her owner, but as her protector, her anchor in a world that had tried to drown her. And in his powerful, enigmatic eyes, she sensed a reciprocal pull, a claim that was both terrifying and utterly, undeniably alluring. This man, who owned her debt, was slowly, irrevocably, beginning to own her heart. The fragile peace Ava had begun to cultivate in Elias's opulent sanctuary was shattered with brutal suddenness. Victor Thorne, humiliated by Elias's audacious takeover of Ava's debt, was not a man to accept defeat gracefully. His pride, more than his finances, had been wounded, and he sought to reclaim what he perceived as his control and Ava. The first incident was subtle, chilling in its precision. Ava was at the hospital, permitted to visit Lily alone for an hour under the watchful, discreet eye of Elena, who waited in the hallway. Lily, thriving under the new advanced care, was laughing, a sound that always made Ava's heart ache with bittersweet joy. As Ava bent to adjust Lily's blanket, a nurse she didn't recognize approached their room. The woman, with overly bright eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them, leaned in close. "Miss Collins," she whispered, her voice syrupy sweet, "Mr. Thorne send his regards. He said to tell you Lily's health is quite delicate." Easy to misplace a chart, isn't it? Or perhaps to forget a crucial medication dose. Ava's blood ran cold. The nurse's gaze flickered to Lily's foredrip, then back to Ava, lingering with a veiled menace that made her stomach clench. It wasn't a direct threat, but an insidious reminder of Victor's reach, a clear implication that he could still access Lily, even within the supposed safety of the hospital. The nurse straightened, her smile firmly in place, and walked away before Ava could even form a coherent response. Renewed fear, sharp and visceral, punched the air from Ava's lungs. Her hands flew to Lily's, clutching them tightly, as if she could physically shield her from the unseen predators. The laughter died in her throat, replaced by a frantic, suffocating panic. Victor was still out there. He hadn't forgotten. Later that week, during an escorted outing to a quiet art gallery, a rare indulgence Elias had permitted, knowing her love for photography, the second incident occurred. Elena, ever vigilant, walked a few paces behind Ava. As Ava admired a vibrant cityscape, a man, seemingly engrossed in his phone, accidentally bumped into her. He mumbled a hurried apology, but as he did, his hand brushed her arm, slipping a small, folded piece of paper into her palm. Before she could react, he melted into the small crowd. Her heart leaped into her throat. Her fingers, trembling, unfolded the note. It was a crude, grainy photo of her apartment building, the one she'd abandoned, with a chilling caption scrawled beneath, "Still remembering where you used to sleep, darling. Missing you, V." The message was a blatant invasion, a declaration that Victor knew her past, her vulnerabilities. It was meant to unnerve, to remind her that even Elias's impenetrable security might have blind spots. Ava felt a wave of nausea, her vision blurring at the edges. The beautiful art around her twisted into grotesque, menacing shapes. Elena, sensing her distress, was instantly at her side. Her hand, firm and reassuring, settled on Ava's elbow. "Miss Collins, are you all right?" Ava could only nod, silently pressing the crumpled note into Elena's palm. Elena's sharp eyes scanned the note, then the room, her expression hardening into a formidable mask. Without a word, she subtly guided Ava out of the gallery, her movements smooth and decisive. Back at the penthouse, Elias listened, his face a mask of controlled fury as Elena recounted the incidents and handed him the note. He didn't raise his voice, but the set of his jaw, the almost imperceptible clench of his fists, spoke volumes. "Unacceptable," he stated, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "He is overstepping." The very next day, Ava witnessed Elias's protection in its rawest, most unflinching form. She was in her room, trying to distract herself by sketching, when she heard Elias on a phone call from his office. His voice, usually so measured, was laced with an icy menace she hadn't heard before. "I don't care about his pride," Elias articulated, each word a chillingly precise strike. He breached a direct warning. "This is not a request, Hayes. I want his assets frozen. Every single one. His properties seized. His network compromised. And the individuals who delivered those messages to Miss Collins and Lily? I want their names, their addresses, and a full report on their next 24 hours. Make it clear. Any further attempt, however subtle, will result in consequences he cannot even begin to comprehend. Make an example." The call ended with a soft click. Ava sat frozen, sketchbook forgotten, her heart pounding. The casual ruthlessness, the sheer unquestionable power in his voice was terrifying. But beneath the terror, a strange sense of immediate relief began to bloom. Elias wasn't just promising protection. He was actively dismantling the threat, swiftly and brutally. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, to wield his immense influence like a weapon. Within hours, Elena confirmed the repercussions. Victor's poker club, the Viper's Den, was raided by authorities, its assets frozen, its operations ground to a halt. His favorite corrupt councilman was facing a sudden, devastating audit. The nurse at Lily's hospital had been mysteriously transferred to a remote, undesirable rural clinic. The man at the gallery had vanished, his personal life apparently dissolving into an administrative nightmare. Elias hadn't just dealt with the threats, he had obliterated the very capacity for Victor to issue them again. Ava watched the news reports of Victor's empire crumbling, a strange mixture of awe and unease swirling within her. Elias had moved with the silent, inexorable force of a landslide. He hadn't involved her, hadn't asked her to make choices or face dangers. He had simply acted, demonstrating his absolute capability to keep her safe. The fear for Lily began to recede, replaced by a profound, if still cautious, trust in Elias's unwavering shield. She was scared of the power he wielded, yes, but she was infinitely more terrified of a world where that power wasn't protecting her. In his golden cage, she was learning that control, in the right hands, could feel a lot like salvation. And as she looked at him later, his face calm, almost serene, she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that he was the only man who could truly keep her and Lily safe. The shadow of Victor Thorne may still linger, but Elias Thorne's protection was a far more formidable force. The aftermath of Elias's decisive strike against Victor Thorne left a strange, almost serene quiet in the penthouse. The omnipresent tension that had clung to Ava like a shroud began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of profound, if still somewhat unsettling security. Victor's threats had vanished, replaced by news reports of his rapid downfall, a testament to Elias's unquestionable power. For Lily, for herself, Ava was undeniably grateful. But it was the quiet moments that truly began to bridge the chasm between them. Elias no longer observed her from a distance. Their shared meals became less formal, more conversational. He asked about her day, about Lily's latest cheerful anecdote, listening with an intensity that made her feel truly heard. And Ava, in turn, found herself seeking his gaze, drawn by the silent strength that resided within those glacial blue eyes. She began to notice the subtle nuances in his expression, a faint tightening around his eyes when he was deep in thought, a fleeting, almost imperceptible softening when Lily's name was mentioned. One evening, Ava found him on the vast balcony, staring out at the cityscape, a single glass of amber liquid in his hand. The city lights glittered below, a silent, glittering carpet. He seemed distant, almost lost in thought. The formidable mask of the billionaire momentarily lowered. Impulsively, Ava stepped out. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice soft, breaking the silence. Elias turned, his eyes holding hers. "It is," he agreed, his voice a low rumble. "And it hides a lot of darkness." "I know," Ava murmured, moving to stand beside him at the railing. "I've seen enough of it." She hesitated, then took a breath. "Thank you, Elias, for what you did to Victor." "For Lily." "For me." He merely nodded, his gaze returning to the city. "He deserved it. He violated a boundary. And that boundary was me?" she asked, a tentative curiosity unfurling in her chest. A muscle in his jaw clenched. "The boundary was vulnerability. The innocent. The exploited. What he did to you and threatened to do to Lily, it crossed a line I do not tolerate." He paused, then continued, his voice rougher now, as if unearthing something long buried. "I've seen it before. People with power preying on those without, breaking them piece by piece just because they can." His words resonated deeply with Ava's own experiences. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time, she sensed a profound, unhealed wound beneath his formidable exterior. "Is that what happened to you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Did someone exploit you?" Elias stiffened, his hand clenching around his glass. He didn't answer immediately, and Ava feared she had overstepped. But then he sighed, a deep, weary sound that spoke volumes. "My father," he began, his voice low, devoid of emotion, yet heavy with unspoken pain. "He was a good man. Built a small business from nothing. He believed in fairness and playing by the rules. But he made the mistake of trusting the wrong partners. Powerful men. Men who saw his integrity as a weakness. They systematically dismantled him, stole everything he built, left him with nothing but debt and a broken spirit." Ava's heart ached for the young Elias, witnessing such injustice. "What happened to them?" Elias finally met her gaze, and in his eyes, Ava saw a flash of the cold, uncompromising ruthlessness that had become his signature. "They learned that some lines, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. Some debts, once incurred, must be paid in full." The implication was clear. He had sought justice, his own kind of justice, and it had been absolute. This deeply guarded wound, this personal tragedy, explained so much about his fierce protectiveness, his almost obsessive need for control, his unwavering moral code when it came to the helpless. Emboldened by his unexpected vulnerability, Ava found herself confessing a secret she had carried like a lead weight. I always felt guilty about Lily. Like it was my fault. Like if I had just worked harder, been smarter, I wouldn't have had to go to Victor. Wouldn't have put her in danger." Her voice cracked, heavy with the burden of her shame and self-blame. Elias reached out, his hand, large and warm, settling gently on her arm. It was a simple touch, yet it sent a jolt, warm and comforting, through her. "Ava," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it, "you fought with everything you had. You sacrificed yourself for her. There is no guilt in that. Only unconditional love." He squeezed her arm gently. "You are the strongest woman I know." His belief in her, so steadfast, so absolute, was a revelation. It was a healing balm to her wounded soul, slowly, irrevocably mending the broken pieces. In that moment, standing under the vast, glittering expanse of the city, their shared vulnerabilities forged an invisible, powerful bond between them. The distance, both physical and emotional, that had defined their relationship began to dissolve. Elias's gaze, once a careful observation, now held a new, deepening affection. His eyes dropped to her lips, a silent question hanging in the charged air. Ava's breath hitched. Her own heart, once solely consumed by fear and Lily's survival, now thrummed with a different rhythm, a burgeoning, dangerous desire for the man who had claimed her. She no longer felt owned. She felt chosen, protected, cherished. And it wasn't just gratitude. It was real. It was unmistakable. He leaned in slowly, his scent cedar, metal, and something uniquely him, enveloping her. Her eyes fluttered closed, a silent invitation. His lips, firm and tender, brushed hers, a tentative, exploratory touch that sent sparks igniting through her veins. It was a soft kiss, a promise, a revelation. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, his breath warm on her skin. Ava, he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't quite decipher, but felt deep in her core. She looked up, her emerald eyes meeting his. In that moment, she knew. Her affection for him wasn't born of circumstance or desperation. It was genuine. It was a potent, irresistible force that had taken root in the most unlikely of places. She had come to his golden cage seeking refuge, but she had found something far more profound, a connection that promised to redefine her very existence. And in his powerful, enigmatic embrace, she was ready to face whatever came next. The fragile world Ava had painstakingly built, piece by fragile piece, in Elias's penthouse shattered with the horrifying abruptness of a glass dropped on marble. The sense of security, the burgeoning hope, the tender affection that had begun to blossom between her and Elias, all of it was ripped away, leaving only a gaping, agonizing void. It began with a frantic call from the hospital. Not the usual calm updates, but a nurse's voice, shrill with panic. "Miss Collins, it's Lily. She's gone." The words echoed in Ava's ears, each syllable a hammer blow to her soul. Gone. Her blood ran cold, turning to ice in her veins. "What do you mean, gone?" She choked out, her voice a raw, unrecognizable whisper. "Where is she? What happened?" The nurse, her voice trembling, explained the inexplicable. A sudden critical power surge in Lily's wing. Medical equipment malfunctioning. Yes. And in the midst of it, Lily, who required constant care and specialized monitoring, had vanished. No trace. No witnesses. Just an empty bed, a disconnected forced stand, and the lingering, sickening scent of ozone. Ava dropped the phone, the sound loud in the sudden, cavernous silence of the penthouse. The world spun. Her vision blurred, spots dancing before her eyes. Lily. Her sweet, innocent Lily. The child she had sacrificed everything for, the fragile beacon of her entire existence, ripped away. Terror, pure and unadulterated, seized her, twisting her gut, stealing her breath. Elias, who had been on a call in his office, heard the sickening thud of the phone and Ava's strangled cry. He burst into the living room, his face a mask of immediate concern, quickly morphing into grim understanding as he took in her pale, distraught face. "Ava, what is it? What happened?" His voice, usually so controlled, was laced with an urgency she rarely heard. "Lily, she's gone," Ava sobbed, the words tearing from her throat, raw and unbearable. They took her." "Victor. It has to be Victor." A primal roar of rage tore from Elias's chest, a sound so guttural, so untamed, it made Ava flinch. His jaw hardened, his eyes, usually glacial, now burned with an inferno of fury and a chilling self-reproach. He had promised her safety. He had promised Lily's protection. And he had failed. "No," he snarled, already pulling out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "No, he wouldn't dare. After what I did to him. But he did dare." Ava shrieked, her own grief and fear curdling into a bitter, searing anger. "He did. And it's because of you. You humiliated him. You took his club, his money, his pride. He wants revenge, Elias, and he knows my weakness. He knows Lily is my weakness, just like you knew. It's your fault. All of it." The words, born of pure agonizing despair, hung in the air, creating an immediate, profound rift between them. Elias flinched as if struck, his furious gaze momentarily softening into one of deep pain and wounded pride. The accusation, though fueled by hysteria, stung him to his core. He had believed he had eliminated the threat. He had believed his power was absolute. And now, the one innocent he had sworn to protect was gone because of his oversight, his failure to anticipate the depths of Victor's depravity. He turned away, his broad shoulders heaving with controlled fury. "Ava, I understand your anger, but this is not the time for blame. We need to find her." "Blame?" Ava cried, tears streaming down her face. "What else is there but blame? I brought her into this. I trusted you. I thought she was safe with you. You said you protected what was yours, Elias. You said you didn't lose what you protected. And now she's gone." The raw accusation, the immense sense of betrayal in her voice, created an almost tangible barrier between them. Elias's expression became hard, unreadable, his previous tenderness completely eclipsed by the urgent need for action and the crushing weight of his perceived failure. He barked orders into his phone, his voice sharp and precise, mobilizing his vast network. Luca and Elena were summoned immediately, their faces grim as they absorbed the devastating news. The penthouse, once a sanctuary, now felt like a sterile tomb, filled with the echo of Ava's sobs and the silent, consuming fury of Elias. Ava paced the gleaming marble floors, her mind a frantic maelstrom of fear and guilt. Every minute that passed was an eternity. Where was Lily? Was she cold? Afraid? Hurt? Her delicate health, already so precarious, wouldn't withstand much trauma. The images that flashed through Ava's mind were nightmarish, each worse than the last. She remembered Lily's small, fragile hand in hers, the way she would look up with trusting, innocent eyes. Now those eyes would be wide with terror, probably alone, in the clutches of Victor Thorne, a man who savored pain. A profound sense of hopelessness began to settle over her. She had thought she was free. She had thought Lily was finally safe. She had dared to hope for a future, even with a man as dangerous and complex as Elias Thorne. But now it all felt like a cruel, elaborate trick. Victor had not only taken Lily, but he had also fractured the nascent trust between Ava and Elias, leaving them both reeling, isolated in their own private hells of fear and self-reproach. Elias looked at her, his blue eyes intense, filled with a tormented resolve. He wanted to comfort her, to offer reassurance, but the chasm of blame and desperation was too wide. He knew he had to find Lily, not just for Ava, but for his own soul. He had sworn to protect what was his, and Lily, by extension, had become irrevocably entwined with that claim. He saw the despair in Ava's eyes, the profound separation anxiety twisting her features, and it fueled his own burning need for vengeance. All seemed lost. But for Elias Thorne, losing was never an option. And Victor Thorne was about to learn the true cost of awakening a sleeping dragon's wrath. The penthouse, once a symbol of Elias's absolute control, now felt like a war room, crackling with raw, unbridled energy. The initial shock in Ava's searing accusation had been absorbed, replaced by a singular, unyielding objective: find Lily. Elias, his face a mask of grim determination, moved with a terrifying efficiency. He was no longer just a billionaire. He was a force of nature unleashed. Every asset, Elias barked into his phone, his voice a low, dangerous growl that promised retribution. Every contact, every camera feed, every data stream. I want every shadow Victor Thorne has ever cast illuminated. Find me Lily. Luca, a silent, deadly shadow, was already deploying teams, his phone a constant whisper against his ear. Elena, her usual stoicism replaced by fierce urgency, coordinated communications, her fingers flying across multiple screens. Ava, her despair morphing into a cold, fierce determination, refused to be sidelined. Victor uses a series of safe houses, she interrupted, stepping forward, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tremors still racking her body. Small, nondescript apartments, often above forgotten businesses. He uses them for his private meetings, places where no one would look twice. She rattled off a few locations she remembered overhearing, places far from his usual opulent haunts. He hides his most sensitive assets in plain sight. Elias's intense gaze snapped to her. He saw not a distraught victim, but a woman fueled by an unwavering love, a woman who understood the nuances of Victor's twisted world. A flicker of admiration, of something deeper, shone in his eyes. Luca, he commanded, cross-reference these locations. Prioritize abandoned or cash-only businesses. Move. Hours blurred into an agonizing eternity. Ava, fueled by caffeine and pure adrenaline, sat beside Elias, offering insights, pointing out potential blind spots. Her knowledge of Victor's habits invaluable. She watched him work, a man transformed. His usual composed demeanor was replaced by a taut, dangerous energy. The ice in his blue eyes had melted, revealing a burning inferno of rage and a barely suppressed fear for Lily. He wasn't just directing, he was hunting. Just as despair threatened to swallow her whole again, Luca's voice, sharp and urgent, cut through the tense silence. Boss, we've got a hit. An old, disused tailor shop in the industrial district. Thermal scans indicate multiple bodies inside. Small, faint heat signature matches a child. Move. Elias roared, already grabbing his jacket. He didn't hesitate. He didn't wait for backup. He didn't even glance at Ava, his focus absolute. But Ava was already moving, grabbing Elena's spare weapon, a small compact pistol she'd secretly learned to handle in her desperate efforts to protect herself long ago. I'm coming with you, she declared, her voice devoid of negotiation. Elias stopped, his eyes locking onto hers. The fury in them was still potent, but mingled with a stark realization. He saw her unwavering resolve, her courage. To deny her now would be to deny a fundamental part of who she was. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her choice, of their shared, desperate purpose. Stay behind me. No heroics, Eva. No risks you can't handle. The black armored SUV screamed through the city streets, a silent, deadly phantom in the night. Eva sat beside Elias, the pistol heavy in her trembling hand, her heart a drumbeat against her ribs. The adrenaline was a bitter taste in her mouth, but her determination was an iron core. They arrived at the desolate industrial district, the tailor shop a dark, anonymous rectangle in a row of grimy buildings. The air was thick with the scent of stagnant water and neglect. Elias's men, a silent, disciplined force, had already secured the perimeter. 2 guards at the front, 3 inside with Victor, Luca whispered into Elias's earpiece. No visible cameras. We jammed their comms. Elias nodded, his face grim. Eva, stay here with Elena. Secure the exit point. If I signal, you move in. No, Eva stated, her voice firm. I'm coming inside. Lily needs me. Elias looked at her, his jaw tight. He could argue, but there was no time. He saw the fierce maternal love blazing in her eyes, matching his own desperate need to find Lily. He grabbed her hand, squeezing it once, a silent promise. Stay behind me, then. They breached the door with brutal efficiency. The heavy metal door crashed inward, revealing a scene of dimly lit, chaotic squalor. Dust motes danced in the sparse light, revealing old sewing machines covered in cobwebs, bolts of decaying fabric, and in the center of the room, Lily. She was tied to a rickety chair, a gag over her mouth, her small body trembling uncontrollably. Her eyes, wide with terror, fixed on Eva. A low whimper escaped her, muffled by the gag. 2 hulking men stood guard, their faces contorted in shock at the sudden intrusion. And then, from the shadows, Victor Thorne emerged, a smug, cruel smile on his face, a pistol clutched in his hand. Well, Romano, Victor sneered, his eyes glittering with malevolent triumph. Looks like I finally found your weakness. And hers. He gestured to Lily, then to Eva. Always knew she was precious to you, Eva. Such a delicate little flower. A guttural growl ripped from Elias's throat. All pretense of calm vanished. He was a man possessed, a storm of unadulterated rage. Let her go, Victor, he commanded, his voice raw, shaking the very foundations of the decaying building. Or what? Victor chuckled, leveling his pistol at Lily's head. You kill me, and she gets a bullet. Your choice, billionaire. Eva gasped, a strangled cry of terror tearing from her. No. Her mind screamed. This couldn't be happening. But Elias didn't hesitate. He moved with a speed that defied his imposing size, a blur of controlled violence. 2 shots cracked through the air, not from his gun, but from his men strategically positioned, taking down Victor's guards with chilling precision. Victor, startled, squeezed his trigger, but the shot went wide, embedding in the ceiling with a shower of plaster dust. Elias was on him in an instant. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. He disarmed Victor with a brutal twist, the pistol clattering to the ground. Then, with a ferocity that stunned Eva, he slammed Victor against a rusty sewing machine, his hand closing around Victor's throat, squeezing. Victor's eyes bulged, his face turning purple. You don't touch what's mine, Elias snarled, his voice a chilling whisper, dripping with venom. You never touch what's mine. Eva, her heart pounding like a drum, rushed to Lily, tearing the gag from her mouth, untying the ropes with frantic fingers. Lily! Oh, my baby, my sweet Lily! She pulled her sister into a fierce hug, tears of overwhelming relief streaming down her face. Lily clung to her, sobbing, her small body trembling. As Elias finally released Victor, dropping him a heap, broken and gasping for air, his gaze found Eva and Lily. The raw, powerful emotions that warred within him were almost unbearable to witness. The lingering rage, the fading terror, and then slowly a profound, possessive love that shone in his blue eyes as he looked at them. He knelt, pulling Eva and Lily into his strong embrace, a protective barrier against the shattered remnants of their nightmare. He had faced down literal empires, but in that moment, holding the 2 most precious people in his life, his hands trembled. He had almost lost them, and that, more than any corporate battle, had shaken him to his very core. He whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "Mine, both of you, mine." The long, desperate hunt was over. Lily was safe, and Victor Thorne would learn that some debts, collected by a furious billionaire, were paid in blood and broken lives. The air in the dilapidated tailor shop, thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder and stale dust, slowly began to clear. Elias's men moved with practiced efficiency, securing the area, their faces grim, but their purpose clear. But for Ava, the world had narrowed to the small, trembling form in her arms. Lily, her sister, pale and fragile, clung to her, small sobs racking her tiny frame. Ava rocked her gently, pressing kisses into her hair, murmuring reassurances that were as much for herself as for Lily. The memory of Victor's gun pointed at her sister, the sheer terror of that moment, left a phantom ache in her chest. "It's over, baby," Ava whispered, her voice hoarse, tears still tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. "You're safe now. Mama's here." Lily, her eyes wide and bloodshot, just buried her face deeper into Ava's shoulder, her small hands clutching at Ava's jacket as if she might vanish again. The trauma was evident in every shudder, every choked gasp. Elias knelt beside them, his face still etched with the raw aftermath of his fury, but his eyes, when they met Ava's, were filled with a profound, overwhelming relief. He reached out a hesitant hand, gently stroking Lily's hair. Lily flinched slightly, but Ava held her closer. "Elena is bringing the medics," Elias stated, his voice a low rumble, "and a secure transport to the penthouse." Ava simply nodded, unable to articulate the depth of her gratitude. She just held Lily, feeling the comforting weight of her sister's body, the steady beat of her small heart, a tangible proof that their nightmare was over. While Ava focused solely on Lily, the grim machinery of Elias's vengeance spun into relentless motion. Victor Thorne, a broken, barely conscious heap on the floor, was dragged away by Luca and two other silent, imposing men. There was no fanfare, no theatrical threats, just a cold, unflinching efficiency that sent shivers down Ava's spine. Elias had promised consequences, and his promises were absolute. Over the next few days, as Lily slowly began to recover in the luxurious, sterile environment of the penthouse, surrounded by top-tier medical staff and Ava's constant, loving care, news reports began to trickle in. Not about the raid, but about the systemic, devastating collapse of Victor Thorne's empire. His offshore accounts frozen. Shell companies dissolved overnight, Elena reported, her tone devoid of emotion as she scanned a tablet. Key associates arrested on various charges: fraud, extortion, racketeering. The Viper's den has been seized by federal agents. His reputation is in tatters. No one will deal with him again. Ava listened, a strange mix of emotions swirling within her. Justice. It was a word she had craved for so long, a concept that felt utterly alien in her past life. But Elias's justice was not the slow, often flawed justice of the legal system. It was a swift, brutal, and uncompromising annihilation. He hadn't just removed Victor as a threat. He had systematically erased his very existence from the criminal underworld, stripping him of every shred of power, influence, and wealth. He had been a viper, and Elias had crushed him completely, leaving nothing but dust. She saw the subtle satisfaction in Elias's eyes when he received updates, not gloating, but a deep, ingrained conviction that he had merely balanced the scales. There was a darkness in him, an unyielding resolve to punish those who preyed on the weak, that both fascinated and slightly terrified her. Yet she found she didn't condemn it. She understood it. She had witnessed the depths of Victor's cruelty, the terror he inflicted. Elias's response, while extreme, felt earned. It was his way of protecting, of ensuring that such evil could never rise again. This was the cost of truly cleaning the slate. As Lily's physical wounds healed, her emotional ones slowly began to mend, nurtured by Ava's unwavering presence and the quiet, unspoken comfort of Elias's secured world. Ava, too, started her own healing. The omnipresent fear for Lily, the crushing weight of debt, the constant humiliation, all of it had been lifted. She found solace in watching Lily regain her laughter. In the simple act of drawing again, her fingers no longer trembling with anxiety, but with the joy of creation. Elias, while still intensely focused on his own world, dedicated more time to them. He would sit in Lily's sun-drenched playroom, watching Ava read to her sister, a rare, soft smile gracing his lips. He never pushed, never forced. He simply existed, a quiet, powerful presence, a constant anchor in their new, safe reality. One evening, after Lily was asleep, Ava found Elias on the balcony, once again bathed in the city lights. He looked tired, the intense ordeal having taken its toll even on him. Ava approached him, heart filled with a profound gratitude that transcended words. "He won't bother us again, will he?" she asked, her voice soft. Elias turned, his blue eyes meeting hers, no longer filled with rage, but with a deep, settled calm. "No," he said, his voice firm, absolute. "Victor Thorne is gone. Truly gone. He will never again be a threat to you, or to Lily. I assure you of that." His words were more than a promise. They were a covenant. He had not only protected them, but he had also systematically rebuilt their shattered lives. Lily had the best care, the security, the chance for a future. Ava had her freedom, her peace of mind, and a sense of belonging she hadn't dared to dream of. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. His touch, once merely protective, now held an undeniable tenderness, a burgeoning affection that mirrored her own. "Ava," he murmured, his thumb stroking her skin, "I made a commitment to protect what is mine. You and Lily are mine, and I will spend the rest of my life ensuring you never have to fear again. We will build a new life here. A life free from shadows, a life of peace and certainty." In his eyes, Ava saw not just the ruthless billionaire, but the deeply wounded man who had found his purpose in protecting others. She saw the powerful force that had brought down an empire for them, and the gentle hand that now cradled her face. She understood his darkness, accepted it, and in a profound, unspoken way, loved him for it. With him by his side, she knew they were truly safe. The slate had been cleaned, not just for Victor, but for their future. And that future, once a terrifying blank, now shimmered with a promise of healing, of justice, and of a profound, unwavering love. Months later, the city, a sprawling tapestry of steel and light, hummed with a rhythm that no longer resonated with fear for Ava. The penthouse, once a gilded cage, had transformed into a true home, filled with the warmth of laughter and the quiet certainty of belonging. Lily, vibrant and radiant, was a testament to the new life they had forged. Her laughter, clear and unrestrained, echoed through the vast rooms, a melody that never failed to bring a soft smile to Elias's lips. Her condition, meticulously managed by the best medical minds Elias could summon, had not just stabilized, but shown remarkable improvement. She was thriving, attending a specialized school, and her future, once a terrifying question mark, now gleamed with endless possibilities. Ava, too, had found her footing, her spirit unburdened by debt and dread. Her love for photography, once a suppressed passion, had blossomed. With Elias's quiet encouragement and unwavering support, she had transformed a sun-drenched corner of the penthouse into her own studio. The walls were adorned with her work, breathtaking cityscapes, intimate portraits of Lily, and evocative abstracts that captured the raw beauty of the world. She now worked as an independent artist, her talent recognized, her passion finally fulfilled. The fear, the desperation, the helplessness, all of it was a distant, fading echo. Their relationship, forged in the crucible of danger and desperation, had matured into a profound, unwavering love. Elias was still intensely possessive, his gaze often lingering on her with an undeniable claim, but that possessiveness was now tempered with a deep, abiding respect and an almost tender adoration. He saw her strength, her resilience, her fierce independence, and he cherished it. He didn't seek to control her, but to protect the precious, vibrant woman she had become. One crisp autumn evening, Ava found Elias in the living room, Lily curled up on his lap, fast asleep, a children's book open on his chest. The scene was so utterly domestic, so profoundly peaceful, that Ava's heart swelled with a joy that felt almost overwhelming. The ruthless billionaire, the man who commanded empires, was utterly disarmed by the small, trusting child in his arms. Elias looked up, his blue eyes softening as they met hers. She finally gave in, he murmured, a rare, genuine smile gracing his lips. Ava smiled back, walking over and gently stroking Lily's hair. "You're good with her, you know." He shrugged, a hint of vulnerability in his gaze. "She's easy to love." He looked at Ava, his smile fading, replaced by an intensity that stole her breath. "Like you." He carefully shifted Lily into a sleeping position on the sofa, then rose, taking Ava's hand, his touch warm and firm. He led her to the expansive windows, the city lights stretching out before them, a dazzling backdrop to their quiet, intimate world. Ava, he began, his voice low, resonating with a depth of emotion she had come to cherish. There was a time I believed my life would always be about control, about power, about ensuring no one could ever harm what was mine again. I didn't know what true belonging felt like. I didn't know what it meant to truly share my world. He turned to face her fully, his hands gently cupping her cheeks, his blue eyes, usually so guarded, now alight with a warmth that was meant only for her. You and Lily, you brought light into a place I thought was destined for shadows. You taught me what it means to truly protect, not just to control. You taught me to love. Ava's eyes welled up, a single tear escaping and tracing a warm path down her cheek. Elias. He silenced her with a soft brush of his thumb, his gaze unwavering. I made a claim on you, Ava. A claim born of necessity, of protection. But now it's a claim born of something far more profound. It's a claim of my heart, my soul, my future. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small, velvet box. Ava's breath hitched. He opened it, revealing a single, magnificent diamond, brilliant and timeless. Ava Collins, he said, his voice husky with emotion. You saved me from a life devoid of true purpose. You gave me a family, a reason to fight, a reason to simply be. Will you, with all your fierce strength and beautiful heart, merge your life with mine? Will you be my wife? Will you accept my forever claim? Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She didn't hesitate. Yes, Elias, she whispered, her voice choked with happiness. 1,000 times, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, the cool metal a symbol of their unwavering commitment. He then pulled her into a deep, tender kiss, a kiss that sealed their past, cemented their present, and promised an endless future. It was a kiss that spoke of peace, of deep love, of the security they had found in each other's arms. Later, as they stood by the window, watching the city sleep, Ava leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Lily stirred on the sofa, mumbling softly in her sleep. The scene was perfect, utterly complete. Elias still wielded immense power, his influence subtly shaping their world, but was always, now, in service of their shared happiness. He had claimed her, yes, but in doing so, he had given her everything, her freedom, her sister's health, and a love that was fiercely protective, deeply respectful, and utterly, eternally theirs. Their journey had begun in a viper's nest, but it had ended in a sanctuary of forever, a testament to the powerful, beautiful truth that even in the darkest romance, true love could not only survive but thrive. Isn't it true that sometimes the chains we carry aren't made of iron, but of fear and the quiet belief we aren't worthy of escape? Ava's journey from a viper's den of crushing debt to a sanctuary of fierce, unwavering love reminds us that past traumas don't define our future. Elias saw beyond her circumstances, claiming not just her life, but her inherent strength, proving that true love isn't just protection. It's seeing and empowering the light within. If this tale of enduring passion and ultimate salvation whispered hope into your soul, please join our community. Like this video and comment, I am worthy to share your strength. Together, we find solace in these stories, knowing we're never truly alone.